Will we be living in a Mad Max scenario if Bitcoin hits $1 million? I don't think so. Today, I'm going to explain the numbers and the maths that exposes what the world will look like when Bitcoin hits $1 million and why we could do it when Bitcoin adoption is less than 1%. And no, we don't need hyperinflation to see Bitcoin at $1 million per coin. That's another massive misconception people have about all of these $1 million Bitcoin price predictions. We don't need the world to melt down. We don't need hyperinflation, and we don't need the masses to come and adopt Bitcoin in a big way to push it to $1 million. So that gets us into the first thing I want to discuss today, and that is adoption. Most people assume we need mass adoption for Bitcoin to hit $1 million. And naturally, most people look out amongst the world and they say, well, the general population is nowhere near close to adopting Bitcoin. So that means $1 million Bitcoin is not even close. And I disagree. This is why. Now, I think a lot of this confusion comes from the fact that Bitcoin is a technology with different adoption curves. Now, this is difficult to understand because most technologies just have one adoption curve. It measures adoption. So for example, if we're looking at the adoption curve of the internet, we are just looking at the number of users or the percent of the world that is using the internet. The same with automobiles. We're just looking at the number of people or the percentage of the population who have traded in their horse for cars. Bitcoin is a little bit different. I think the correct way we should be measuring Bitcoin's adoption and looking at Bitcoin's adoption curves is breaking it up into different segments. So yes, we should be measuring how many people are using Bitcoin, okay? And I think most estimates in this space look at the number of people who might have signed up for an exchange. There are some better on-chain measurements of how many people are using Bitcoin, but even this is difficult to track because what constitutes someone using Bitcoin? In most of these studies, they're just looking at, has somebody touched Bitcoin once, whether it be in an exchange or whether that be on chain. It's difficult to decipher how frequently someone is using Bitcoin. And this gets into the other way I think we should be measuring Bitcoin's adoption more. And that is looking at Bitcoin as a monetary technology, okay? This is a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier to gauge, but I think we should be looking at Bitcoin's adoption based upon how much of the globe's monetary energy it has captured, okay? Looking at Bitcoin against its total addressable market cap, okay? So again, if we were to look at these different S curves, Bitcoin adoption is at different levels on these different S curves. So this is a little bit of a long way to explain things, but maybe an example might help. So for example, when Michael Saylor adopts Bitcoin in a big way like he has, and he plows all of his company's treasury into Bitcoin, he takes out debt to even buy Bitcoin, he doesn't push the global adoption of Bitcoin up by one person divided by the 8 billion people population. I think that we should actually be looking at how much of the monetary energy of the world has now plugged into Bitcoin because of this one individual. It all goes back to that Pareto's principle distribution that we talked about in a previous video, where we showed that typically 80% of the population are only going to hold 20% of the Bitcoin on a Bitcoin standard. So considering this, considering Bitcoin's a monetary technology, we need to be watching the individuals who control the most amount of money and watch what they are doing with Bitcoin, okay? So again, we only need really 20 Michael Saylors to come into the space and buy a significant amount of Bitcoin for Bitcoin to be worth millions of dollars per coin, okay? Let's put some numbers on that. Right now, there's around 2 million Bitcoin sitting on exchanges for sale. Michael Saylor holds about 1% of the total Bitcoin supply, so about 200,000 coins. That means there's only enough Bitcoin on exchanges for 10 Michael Saylors to come in and buy the same amount of Bitcoin that Michael Saylor has bought. Now, again, that sounds crazy. That sounds out there. But again, there's 58,000 public company, there's 2,500 billionaires, and there's 60 million millionaires, okay? We only need 10 people to come in and want to do what Michael Saylor has done. And I believe that if all the Bitcoin are hypothetically ripped off the exchanges and put into the hands of entities who aren't going to sell that Bitcoin for 100 years, I think price is going to be significantly higher, okay? And I think if Bitcoin is adopted by just these 10 individuals, it's going to look like Bitcoin has been adopted by a lot more than 10 people if this happens. Now, again, I don't know where the price of Bitcoin would be in this hypothetical scenario, but you'd have to guess it's probably going to be a lot higher, okay? And again, this is why I think we can reach $1 million Bitcoin while still having global population less than 1% today. So this gets me into the second thing I want to discuss today, and that is unit bias, okay? I think everybody gets confused because they look at the sticker price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's at $65,000, $70,000 per coin. I'm late to Bitcoin. The best returns for Bitcoin are behind it. And I just don't think that is the case. I think we should be looking at Bitcoin in regards to its market cap and then compare that market cap to its total addressable market cap. So Bitcoin today has a market cap of around 1.3, $1.4 trillion. The total addressable market cap for money or wealth in the world today is 900 trillion. This puts Bitcoin's theoretical adoption at way less than 1%, okay? And even if Bitcoin was at $1 million, and that would require it to have a market cap of around $20 trillion, people still kind of can't wrap their heads around the fact that that still only represents 2.22% of the entire globe's money being in Bitcoin's market cap. In this hypothetical world, Bitcoin would still be tiny at a $1 million price tag. Just look at all of these other vehicles of wealth in the world on this amazing website that visualizes all of the money in the world. We can see that the equity market is worth $100 trillion. Bitcoin would only be worth 20. It'd still be a fraction of global equities. The real estate market, $330 trillion. Bitcoin would still only be worth $20 trillion. It'd still be a fraction compared to these much larger stores of values and buckets that Bitcoin is competing against, okay? So a $1 million Bitcoin is not going to change the world. If $20 trillion wants to move out of that $900 trillion bucket and flow into Bitcoin, Bitcoin's not going to completely disrupt the world. And what I think most people miss about even this calculation that we've showed you today is that Bitcoin doesn't need $20 trillion to flow into it to push it to a $1 million market cap. We know that Bitcoin has a multiplier effect, and that is because not all the 21 million Bitcoin are actually available for sale. So we know that based on on-chain data over the past 2 to 3 years, we know the moving average for the Bitcoin multiplier effect has averaged around 4x. Okay, so in reality, you only really need around $5 trillion of capital to want to come into the Bitcoin market cap to actually push it up to a $20 trillion market cap valuation when we consider that 4x multiplier effect. So again, if $5 trillion moves from the $900 trillion of wealth in the world and wants to flow into Bitcoin, pushing it up to that $1 million per Bitcoin price tag, is that really going to completely change the world or descend the world into a Mad Max scenario like many people believes it will? I don't think so, okay? Yes, price is set at the margins, and what happens at the margins is important. I do understand that caveat, but I don't think the world is going to completely, melt down just because we have a $1 million Bitcoin price tag. And I think it is this idea of unit bias that kind of warps people's perceptions around this. So I hope that looking at Bitcoin's market cap is maybe a little bit of a different and a better measure or visualization to actually compare Bitcoin's market cap to all of the wealth in the world, okay? Now, something else that I want to address is this idea of $1 million Bitcoin being a pessimistic idea, a negative idea, or a negative outlook on the world. I think some people who aren't involved in the Bitcoin space think that Bitcoiners are just cheering for the world to melt down, the banking system to fail, the bond market to break and obliterate, and that's the only way we get $1 million Bitcoin. So we're kind of betting on this pessimistic future so that our bags get pumped. And I just don't think that's the case. I really don't think many Bitcoiners really care what is going on in the fiat world. And I really don't know where that narrative is coming from. Maybe it's because some people outside of Bitcoin associate the Bitcoiners with the gold bugs. And that is where I think that narrative is more prevalent. I think it's certainly more prevalent in the gold bug space to be hoping that the banking system fails. So gold is the only money outside the system, outside the system that gets bid, and the entire fiat system collapses, and all of the central banks have to revalue their gold holdings higher. Okay, I think that's where that narrative comes from. But I think buying Bitcoin and wanting Bitcoin to go to $1 million per coin, I feel like that's more optimistic than the pessimistic labeling that it does commonly get shrouded in the non-Bitcoin space. Okay, I really think that the price of Bitcoin going up is actually the most optimistic thing in the world today. It is a reflection of the world slowly waking up to the fact that, hang on a minute, we want our money based on reality. We want our monetary system governed by rules and not rulers. Putting all of your monetary energy in Bitcoin is a vote for a more optimistic future. It's a vote for a future where you don't want to fund war by holding fiat dollars. I feel like holding all of your wealth in dollars and just blindly being okay with the clown world that we're living in today, I feel like that's the most pessimistic thing somebody could do. Imagine just letting someone steal 15, 20% of your wealth every single year, just in the form of inflation. We're not even talking about the 20, 30, 40% taxes that are being enforced in some Western countries today. I feel like being okay with all of that theft, that's pessimism. That's a negative outlook for the future. That is submission, saying that, yes, my government that has a terrible track record is better at allocating wealth than these successful entrepreneurs who have built successful businesses. I feel like that's pessimism, okay? I feel like putting all of your wealth in Bitcoin, starving the fiat system, that's optimism. That's hope for a future. That's putting money aside for yourself and your future family. That's being optimistic on the future. So again, I don't want to get into this philosophical rabbit hole. I want to more think of this rationally and economically. So let me try to explain it this way. The more wealth that is in the fiat system, the more wealth that there is in the world that is able to fund clown world, or fund wars, or fund XYZ social program that you might not be a fan of, okay? The bigger the Bitcoin pie gets, and the more money that is parked in Bitcoin, and the higher the Bitcoin price tag is, I feel like there is more order in the world, okay? Bitcoin is the most ordered monetary system in the world that is directly built on reality, okay? It's tied to reality. It's tied to a system where nobody can change the rules, okay? I feel like the bigger that pie is, the bigger that bucket is, the less extreme clown world is, okay? The only reason that we have these crazy events like the 2020 hysteria, that was only made possible because of the fiat monetary system. Okay, when you really follow the money, you'll be able to see that the entire 2020 situation only happened because fiat money is so prevalent today. It only happened because all of the money printing that happened in early 2020 and the super low interest rate environment. It made all of these uneconomical, unrational decisions possible. And that is only because Bitcoin was small enough, okay? The bigger the Bitcoin gets, the less economical all of this craziness over here happens. And just think about it. All of that craziness in 2020 directly made the Bitcoin pie bigger, okay? It directly incentivized smart, successful business people from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, America to leave their Western countries, go and park more of their capital in the Bitcoin world, but also park their physical bodies in more rational environments, okay? The amount of Canadians that I have met in El Salvador is ridiculous. There's Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, there's people from this Western world that have all permanently left clown world. They've parked their bodies in a more rational environment, and they've also parked their economic value in more rational environments, okay? So the more crazy situations we see in fiat world, the bigger the Bitcoin pie gets, and that means the less noisy or the less hysterical these fiat events can be if there's less monetary energy to extract. So that was a really long and roundabout way to explain that I think buying Bitcoin is optimism. Buying Bitcoin is not pessimistic. We don't need the entire world to melt down to get a $1 million Bitcoin price tag. And hoping for a future with a $1 million Bitcoin price tag is not pessimistic, okay? It is optimistic. It is saying that we believe in technology. We believe in a world governed by rules and not corrupt rulers. And when we run the numbers, we can see that we don't need 10, 20, 30% global adoption and understanding of Bitcoin to get a $1 million Bitcoin price tag. And in that world, you only do really need to own just a tiny fraction of Bitcoin to have your lives completely transformed, okay? If you want to learn why 0.015 Bitcoin could actually be enough to put you in the new class of millionaires on a Bitcoin standard, you're going to love a recent video we filmed on that topic. I'm going to put a link to that one up on screen somewhere around there. And with all that said, thank you so much for tuning into this one. Let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this one. A little bit of a different video. So we're excited to hear what you thought of it, and we will see you guys in the next video.